I'm pleased to be here today with Bob Bailey, MPP for Sarnia-Lambton, Jamie Riome, Executive Director of the Holland Marsh Growers Association, and Amanda King from the Ontario Association of Food Banks. We're here to talk about how we can strengthen the Local Food Act. Last year, we were very disappointed that the bill introduced by the government contained nothing concrete to increase local food. During her leadership campaign, Premier Wynne promised to strengthen the Local Food Act. But the version that was reintroduced still does nothing to increase the consumption of local food outside of government buildings. Ontario can do better. We believe that Ontario needs a real food act. That's why we've held local food roundtables in London, Windsor, Kingston, Woodstock, Stratford, and Ottawa to hear from people involved with local food and Ontario's food system. That's why we've already announced that we will be putting forward an amendment to require mandatory food education at every grade to increase food literacy. It's also why we're pleased to announce today that we will be putting forward an amendment to the Local Food Act modeled on Bob Bailey's private member's bill. The amendment will create a tax credit for farmers who donate agriculture products to an Ontario food bank. It's an idea that we heard strong support for during our roundtables on local food. This will ensure that Great Ontario local food will get to those who need the food the most. Now I want to pass it over to Bob to explain details of his bill.
Well, thank you, Ernie, and thank you, everyone, for being here today. This is an issue that's very important to me. It first came to the fore when I volunteered to serve hot meals at the local Inn of the Good Shepherd in Sarnia in my riding. I saw with my own eyes the need in my community for food banks and the soup kitchens and the work that they did. And so then, 3 times after that, I introduced the Fighting Hunger with Local Food Act, only to see it fail when the Liberal government prorogued the legislature. In both instances, this act received support from all parties and was even highlighted in the 2012 Environmental Commissioner's report as an idea to address the glaring need for food to the hungry in Ontario and the horrendous waste of food in our modern society. The Fighting Hunger with Local Food Act proposes a simple change to the tax system that will go a long way to relieve hunger and eliminate waste in our province. Inspired by similar programs in 10 United States states, my bill creates a non-refundable tax credit worth 25% of the wholesale value of agricultural products that farmers would donate under this system. The bill would also permit unused tax credits to be carried forward for up to 5 years. While it might not solve the whole problem, I think it's a common sense solution to a clear need both in my community and in communities across Ontario. The Ontario Association of Food Banks reports that food bank usage in Ontario has increased by over 10% between 2008 and 2012. Last year alone, more than 413,000 men and women in Ontario, including over 160,000 children of that number, turned to food banks each month. This is an all-time high for the province and is straining our system to its limits. Even well-stocked food banks struggle to provide fresh, healthy food. In fact, the Ontario Association of Food Banks believes that 70% of Ontarians using food banks do not have access to the recommended daily servings of fruit and vegetables. And as we all know, proper nutrition is essential to our well-being, but more importantly, it is essential to the good health of our young people and children. For many food banks, significant need occurs from June to August, but rarely do we think of our local food banks during the summer and autumn harvest. Ironically, while food banks struggle to provide to those most in need, Ontario farmers must dispose of or plow back into their fields more than 25 million pounds of fresh, nutritious foods each harvest. But why does this occur? Well, in many instances, the food left behind is considered seconds. While perfectly healthy, tasty, and fresh, the produce is not chosen for sale at market because of cosmetic reasons such as size, shape, or color. You may wonder then, why don't farmers just donate this food? Many do, but in many cases, farmers often cannot afford the extra cost to harvest, process, and deliver their unsold produce and foodstuffs to the local food banks, despite a clear desire in the industry to do so. Simply put, we have the food, we just can't get it to those in need. This proposed tax credit will reduce a producer's tax burden, provide a strong incentive to make a donation, and provide a high return on investment for the Ontario government. It will cost the province very little in lost revenue, costing roughly $750,000 for an increase of over 5 million pounds of food to the food banks. These figures suggest that this simple tax credit could provide a return of over $7 for every dollar invested. I believe that this amendment prevents a concrete solution which will not only assist local food banks, but also local farmers and struggling Ontarians. It will fight two problems in our province: hunger and waste. I would encourage Premier Wynne as Agricultural Minister and as Premier to support our amendment to include this tax credit in the Local Food Act. It's just the right thing to do. Thank you. And at this point, I'll I'll introduce Amanda King from the Ontario Association of Food Banks, who will have some remarks on this bill.
Thank you very much. I just also want to thank MPPs Bob Bailey and Ernie Hardeman for hosting this event. I think in Ontario, it's hard to believe that people are hungry. Hunger doesn't look the way we sometimes think it might look, but there are over 412,000 individuals accessing food banks every single month, 160,000 of which are children. These are huge, huge numbers. There are also a number of misconceptions as to who it is that accesses food banks, but the largest growing groups are actually recent university graduates, students, senior citizens, and wage workers. We are incredibly excited about this bill. We do have strong relationships with farmers who have been incredibly generous over the last several years, but this does provide a little extra incentive. It provides some compensation, and it also helps to strengthen those relationships. So we are incredibly excited by this potential, and truly believe it will help providing more fresh food to our food bank clients across the province.
Jamie? We'll now call on Jamie Riom.
Bob, thank you, as well to you, Ernie. I represent farmers in the Holland Marsh. That means that I represent farmers that are basically the backyard garden for the City of Toronto, which is proportionally one of the largest users of food banks. But I also represent an area that is very generous by their very nature, that they give products on a weekly basis to the food banks and to a number of other community organizations that help with the distribution of food. It's vitally important that that link be established, that that fresh product be able to get to those in need. It's time after time we've found the research that's indicated that the link between a healthy diet is actually one that helps people. And my farming community firmly believes that a hand up is much better than a hand out. And that's how we view this. This is an opportunity for farmers, not just in my area, in the Holland Marsh, but farmers right across the province to be able to utilize what they do, to be able to give back to the communities that they grow in, to be able to give back to the citizens of Ontario, product that they take great pride in. When the farmers grow over 220 different products, different crops in this province, we shouldn't be having to deal with hunger. That shouldn't be an issue. We should be moving forward with a greater demand for our food and developing a sustainable system that helps everybody along the way. What this does is provide some economic incentive for the farmers, but I can honestly assure you that they are not going to change how they do things. They will still continue. They will still continue to donate. They will still continue to give products. They will still continue to be helping their fellow citizens along the way. At the end of the day, this amendment, which we had supported as an association right from the very get-go, is something that benefits every citizen of Ontario and recognizes the unique, for lack of a better word, bridging between a rural population and an urban one. And that's what we really do best as a farming community, is be able to provide our fellow citizens with the daily sustenance that they need.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And that concludes our presentation. With that, we'll open it to questions if there are any.
How much more food do you think it's going to direct towards the food banks? How much, how can you evaluate that at all?
Yeah, well, the amount that presently goes to landfill and or is disposed of every year, plowed under, is over 25 million pounds. So we think that, I think the numbers from the Ontario Food Banks is somewhere in the neighborhood of a minimum of 5 million pounds that they think that they would get of that. They won't get all that 25 million pounds, obviously, because there'd be, issues with the transportation of that, but it would definitely increase the amount that's available.
How much would that cost?
Sorry, Bob.
Go ahead, Rob.
No, sorry, Bob. How much would that cost? Like the tax
Treasury?
credits cost money.
Yeah, the Treasury right now, the first year would be estimated $750,000.
That's it.
Yeah. It's amazing, the spin-off on it. I think it's like $7 to everyone invested. Well, yeah, exactly.
So when was Wynne the agriculture minister when you pushed this before, right? Or was she
No.
it died on the order paper, so it was.
Yeah, it was in the original government. I think we first introduced it in 2010. I'd have to, Garrettson? I'm not sure who the,
McMeekins?
It was
McMeekins, probably
This sounds like a no-brainer. If it's only $750,000, have you had any outreach to Wynne's office about this?
We've written letters, and we've also, obviously, and all of the, we can give you the documentation, a number of the farm organizations themselves who, have great connections with the government, the Federation of Agriculture, all of the major producers, operational groups, as Mr. Riom has already indicated, and so did Ernie, they've all supported this. The vegetable growers, they've all come on board and said, yes, this is something that we'd support. They've supported it in writing, and they've lobbied the minister and the premier for it.
What would the tax credit look like for the farmer? Like, how much money would the farmer get for, say, donating per bushel of apples or something like that? Can you give me an estimate?
Ernie, do you want to speak to that?
Well, I think the present act that Bob has introduced was based on the wholesale price of the bushel of apples of those they did sell, and then get a percentage of that. I think it's 25% of that, if they harvest the apple anyway and then give it to a local food bank. So it'd be 25% of what they got for the bushel of apples at the wholesale level when they marketed their apples.
I was at a food bank locally in Sarnia the other day, and one of the pork producers locally was representing the pork industry, and they donated a number of hundreds of pounds of processed pork. It was already in the form of hamburger, and they donated that. And he was looking at my bill, and he says, I process 6,000 hogs a year. He said, at the end of the year, he said, when I'm doing my income tax, he said it would be nice to have this 25% tax credit. He said, I'm going to keep doing what I'm doing, and our industry is, as well as Mr. Riom has already said. But he said this would certainly, be a benefit to my industry and to encourage smaller producers, to do the same thing.
What's the likelihood of, if the premier agrees to embrace this amendment and add it to the bill, is that sort of enough to make sure that you guys pass the bill? Is this something that's going to happen, I guess?
I would think that, Ernie, do you
Yeah,
want to
I think it's important to recognize that we have not yet seen the Local Food Act at committee. When it comes to committee, this could be an amendment we
That we
put
would make.
forward to design to fit within the Local Food Act. And then, of course, if the committee supported it and went back for third reading, it would pass along with the Local Food Act.
It's had support, like we said earlier in my remarks. It has had all-party support at the other readings. No one has spoke against it. No one has made an argument that it wouldn't work. I've had other bills that people have had issues with, but this certainly isn't one of them. It's feeding children that are hungry and people that are, there for the grace of God go I. People don't have a lot of arguments with that. So I would see that this is something that every member, regardless of party stripe, across this province could get behind, and the food banks and the churches in their area would certainly support them.
Do you have any estimates of how much food is wasted because it's simply too expensive to,
Yeah.
collect, process?
Well, the numbers that the industry give us themselves are 25 million pounds plus every year that is either going to landfill or is plowed back under in fields. And some farmers can't even do that. I had a tomato farmer tell me that in his case, he said, I have to, take it to landfill and pay to dispose of it because he said, I can't continue to plow it down because it makes my soil too acidic. So they can't even leave it on the land and plow it under. So, there's just, and Ernie knows more about agriculture than me, but I know that that's an argument that this one farmer made to me, a tomato farmer, for example. So, yeah, that's the numbers that the food banks and people in the business tell us, that there'd be a minimum of 25 million pounds that are going to landfill or is disposed of every year.
I know. George Morris did a study last year. Canada-wide, it's about $39 billion that we waste on food. But that's not just from the farmer end, that's not just from the Ontario Food Terminal end, that's people themselves. Much of this is dependent on other amendments that go through. And most importantly would be something like the food literacy. That's an important aspect when dealing with food banks and dealing with our fellow citizens. We become very much a convenience-based society. They don't know what to do with a raw potato. They don't know what to do with a lot of the raw products. So there's a lot of this that needs to be built in. There is an education component to this. But when you're wasting $39 billion worth of food, and globally, if you speak to it, it's 1 billion people that go hungry every night, that's problematic for a society that prides itself on being better than what we've become to expect.
Did you get any rationale from the government as to why this wasn't included in the Local Food Act if you did raise it with?
Well, I think as we looked at the reintroduction of the Local Food Act, we found that they call it an aspirational bill because there's absolutely no direction into do anything significantly. It gives the minister the opportunity to do things and that she might deem appropriate, but there is no direction or no actual activity in the bill at all. And that's why we think with the amendments we're introducing that we can actually make it a Local Food Act that actually has, what shall we say, some teeth in it and actually accomplishes something as opposed to just being aspiring to do something. Let's get something done.
Do you have other amendments you want to see to the bill as well then?
Well, we have already mentioned that we will be introducing putting food literacy in the curriculum for all grades in the school system, so young people will learn more about where their food comes from and how to treat it from field to fork.
Just a practical question. What type of food would we be talking? Are we talking meat? Are we talking dairy? Are we talking produce? Lettuce?
Mainly this is about produce. The dairy farmers already have and Ernie can speak to that more fully, but the dairy farmers already participate on an ongoing basis. I know the pork producers are starting a new program. I just spoke to that a minute ago. They've started a new initiative as well. This is mainly based right now, but it could be expanded, be up to the minister and regulations. But this right now is to speak to vegetables, and those type of crops and vegetables. But it could certainly be expanded. That would certainly be up to the minister.
But the 25 million pounds that's wasted, that includes meat products and dairy as well, does it? Or is it just 25 million pounds
No,
of
it'd be
vegetables?
mainly vegetables and, and
Last
fruit.
question? Anyone?
Sorry, Ernie, do you want to speak to that?
Yes, and it doesn't include anything except the produce because all the others, the excess is harvested along with the regular amount. If you have pork going into the processing plant, it doesn't go to waste from there, and there is a credit when someone turns that over to the food bank already. Where the problem lies here is where farmers have produce in the field, but at no cash benefit, they can't afford to harvest it. And so this will encourage them to harvest it and put it into the food bank.
Now, is there potential for misuse of this credit? Could farmers, be growing things that they wouldn't have otherwise put to market, but they'd say, we're donating it to a food bank, some kind of kale that nobody wants or something? Is that?
No, I think all farmers would be quite aware that if you're going to harvest it and get 25% tax credit of its wholesale value, you're not going to grow it for that tax credit.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.